I just couldn't do it without crying or getting upset.
Every once in a while, you meet someone whose reason for doing something is far bigger than the thing itself. What today's guest has done sounds almost impossible, but the why behind it, even more powerful, is a story of grief, stubborn hope, and a way to speak when words used to feel impossible. And somehow through the miles, he found a voice, found a purpose that he knew he didn't know he had. Welcome to the podcast, Lewis.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No worries. Before everything and before the big challenge that we're going to jump into, what was it like growing up every day for you when you were a little kid before the adventures?
Yeah, I guess growing up, very, very standard childhood from the northeast of England, Newcastle. Was always very active growing up, probably borderline ADHD, I would argue. On reflection now, could never sit still, would always be out and about playing every sport I could get my hands on, but quickly sort of fell in love with running and athletics and cross country. And running's really trending at the minute. Everyone is really into their running. But back when I was sort of 8, 9, 10 years old, it certainly wasn't the cool thing to do. And everyone was playing football, and I'd be out there doing cross countries on a Saturday. So it's something that I've always loved to do. Uh, and yeah, had a very standard childhood. Living in Tynemouth in Newcastle. Both parents very caring and looking after me and my brother throughout our childhood. So yeah, I would argue quite a straightforward standard childhood.
Cool. And what drew you into the running then, rather than the football and all the other sort of traditional sports growing up?
Yeah, I guess my dad's probably a big influence on that because although he did play a lot of football himself, he started to get into running in his 40s, and that would have been when I was about 9 or 10. And he was going to the running club and things like that. And I used to just go along and do the kids section, and then I would do a park run on a weekend and yeah, I think I just enjoyed the sort of the grind, enjoyed the sort of everyday trying to better yourself, chasing times. And I think naturally I was actually quite decent at it younger. I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet. I was never, an international athlete, or never represented England or Scotland or anything like that. But, county level running, and it was what I enjoyed.
Cool. And what did it mean to you before the challenge existed, like running? What did it mean to you in your life? Was it an outlet, a habit, or just something that you thought, my dad's doing it, I
Yeah,
like my dad a lot, and go from there?
probably a little bit of both, a bit of an outlet. I mean, exercise is massive, isn't it, for mental health? But I probably didn't realize that at the time. I was just doing it because I enjoyed it. And if I had a stressful day, as stressful as days in high school can get, or sixth form can get, I'd go for a run or vice versa. But also, yeah, definitely a habit. Yeah, I think when you do sport and do something daily for so long, you kind of kick yourself when you have a day off, or you kick yourself if you have too long off. So it was definitely a bit of a habit, bit of an outlet, and yeah, just kept it going throughout my teens, and it's always been something I love.
And it was something that obviously then it's nice to have that as a sort of a go-to, a nice outlet, a nice thing. And if we shift gently into the part in which the challenge came and everything sort of shifted in your life, which was 2018?
Yeah,
How did that
2018.
sort of moment reshape things for you?
Yeah, so I mean, 2018, I unfortunately lost my brother to suicide. I was 18 years old at the time, just turned 18, and he was 21, so he was an older brother, and had no signs of anything like that. That he was thinking of doing something like that, or the way he was feeling. So it was a massive shock. You know, as an 18-year-old, I think I was maybe 6 months off sitting my A levels. It's the kind of thing that you never expect to happen to your family or someone that you know. So it was really difficult to come to terms with, to understand, and probably arguably still is to this day. I think the thing with suicide is it kind of, you never really do understand it. It does leave a lot of unanswered questions. So as an 18-year-old, that was really challenging. Yeah, I guess immediately after that, running did become a bit of a coping mechanism and a bit of an outlet, but that was actually the first time in my life where I didn't run for probably about 6 months. And I remember trying to go for a run, and I just couldn't do it without crying or getting upset, because I think, you know, often when you go for a run, you manage to clear your head, you sort of process those thoughts, and a lot of the thoughts that I was having, I didn't really want to process. So there was definitely a time post losing my brother that I didn't really run, and yeah, I think that was the main reason. So yeah, 18 years old, unfortunately lost my brother to suicide, and was trying to navigate that through the rest of sixth form, through the rest of my studies, and also trying to run and sort of keep myself sane.
Yeah. And where did the idea come from for your challenge, which was Newcastle to New York?
New York. So yeah, prior to my brother taking his own life, he'd loved to visit New York. He'd been there sort of 6 or 7 times. Um, and that was where he wanted to live. Ultimately, he was studying a computer science degree, and his aim was to get a job in New York and potentially live and work there one day. And yeah, unfortunately, never got to fulfill that dream. But it wasn't until about 6 years after losing Connor that I felt that I was in the position to maybe do a bit of a challenge or a bit of a charity fundraiser. And it was always in the back of my mind, that it was something that I'd like to do, given my love for running. And I remember 2024, around this time of the year, so around October, November of 2024, I was desperately trying to break a certain target for 5K. So I really wanted to break 16 minutes for 5K. And I had a race, I can't remember the date exactly, but around October, November. And I remember telling myself, do this race, and if you don't get 16 minutes, if you don't break 16 minutes for 5K, just get rid of all this racing and 5K nonsense and do the charity challenge that you've always wanted to do. And yeah, lo and behold, I didn't do 16 minutes. I think I did 16:20 or 16:21.
Yeah.
And then I just decided, yeah, stuff it, I'm just going to go for it. So it was between sort of deciding in the October to then starting in January 25th. So it was, dare I say, a little bit sort of impulsive. Maybe I sort of decided, right, I'm just going to do it, and then decided to go.
Wow. What do you remember about those early days of the challenge? Did it feel achievable or completely overwhelming? And what made you come up with because it was 128 marathons,
In
one
100.
marathon a day for 128 days?
Yeah. So I guess the thought process behind the numbers was, obviously my brother really wanted to live in New York. That was his dream. So I decided, well, one day I just looked, what's the distance, Newcastle to New York, on a hypothetical direct flight. So I came up with 3,332 miles. Divided that by 26.2, and I think it gave me 127.5. But I thought, oh well, I have to round up. I can't round down. So I decided on the 128. And that was, yeah, 128 full marathons in 128 days. And I then worked back from what would have been Connor's 28th birthday. So worked back from the 2nd of June, and that meant that I had to start on the 25th of January. So that was kind of the process behind the numbers and the dates. And then I guess when it comes to actually starting it, from the time in doing the 5K race in November, I'd never actually ran a marathon. I'd never done the marathon distance. So It was a bit of a uplift in training and uplift in miles. Started doing a few back-to-back marathons on weekends, just to see how the body felt. And then it was it was a case of maybe just self-belief. And I remember I did believe that I could do it. And I was training for it, but I still hadn't really told anyone. And then as soon as I'd sort of put a bit of a thing out on social media, I do remember feeling really quite anxious because there is an element of, you've put yourself out there to do something pretty extraordinary. And if you don't do it, it's all about my brother. It's got a big sort of weight on my shoulders to complete this now. And yeah, I remember my dad being pretty, I mean, he would admit it as well, pretty pissed off because he was like, you really are setting yourself up to fail. He just genuinely didn't believe that it was possible. And then my mum was more like, oh, well, how many hours are you going to be running for about 90 minutes a day? I was like, not quite 90 minutes, mum, probably about 4 to 4.5 hours. So she didn't have any clue of what a marathon entailed, which probably was in my favour.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a mix of emotions to begin with, to answer the question in a roundabout way. I mean, it was obviously exciting, but also very, very nerve-wracking to think
Ah,
about how far I had ahead. I mean, I got to about day 5 or 6 and started to struggle and started to think, I'm on day 6 here. How on earth am I going to do another 122 days of this? So yeah, there was definitely those thoughts to begin with.
and dare I say then, if you then had the thought November, October, November, then you got December, January, 2 months to go from training at 5K, running very, very quick, to then get your body conditioned to be able to run one marathon. I mean, people are training now for London, then they give themselves 6 months to do one event.
Yeah,
You're then doing all of that. So obviously that's I suppose, the practical side of it. But then if you've got the
yeah,
emotion driving it and the real reason behind it,
I
but you
know.
were still fitting this around a full-time job.
So yeah, I didn't leave my job. I did work full time throughout. So I set the marathons up Monday to Friday. I'd do half of a marathon before work and half a marathon after work. And then Saturday and Sunday I'd do the full marathon, which was rather challenging. Never mind just doing the actual running, but even just getting up so early every day was a bit of a challenge. The logistics of managing food was really hard to get calories in and around meetings and going to work and traveling for work. So yeah, when I look back on it, I do think, yeah, I was a bit mad to think that I could go from doing what I did in October, November to then starting this challenge. But there's also an element now looking back on it where sometimes if you think about these things too much, you do kind of just scare yourself off and you let those doubts enter. So I was kind of just of the thought, let's go for it. And when people do ask, how did you think that you could do it? I always, and it sounds cheesy now to say it, but I always think this is what I did think at the time, and I believe it now, is that if you've got an idea and it's an idea that you've created in your brain, then it's only in your brain because it's possible. And I just used to tell myself that, like, come on, Lewis, you've came up with this. You wouldn't have came up with this if it wasn't possible. And that's what I wholeheartedly believed when those days got tough. And yeah, it seemed to work.
Was it more physically tough or emotionally tough in those early few days? Or let's say take the first 2 weeks of running.
Physical, definitely the physical battle to begin with. And I'd reached out to people that had done similar things. There is people that have done incredible running challenges, and there's a guy down south, who's done 365 marathons in 365 days. There's a woman in America who's done 100 and 100. So I did speak to them, and they all said, the first 2 to 3 weeks will be the hardest, and then dare I say, it kind of gets a little bit easier as the body adapts. So yeah, certainly the first 2 weeks, I was struggling with swollen feet that was resulting in tons of blisters. I had really bad sciatica that I'd never experienced before. So it was a real physical battle for the first 2 weeks, certainly. But then, yeah, as the challenge evolved, I mean, the challenge was almost 6 months long. So it was a huge, long grind, and it quickly became apparent that, although there was physical challenges and physical things to get through, it was certainly an emotional journey more so. And I often say that, the early mornings, the dark nights, the injuries were all really, really hard, but talking about Connor and talking about my brother and talking about my experience with suicide was by far harder than anything that I had to endure physically. And I kind of made at the outset, I'd made the goal of doing at least one little video vlog a day and just put that on Instagram or TikTok or wherever I put it. And naturally, I just started talking about Connor every day and talking about why I'm doing it, what I'm doing it for. And yeah, it quickly became apparent that that sort of emotional challenge was a lot greater than the physical one.
Yeah. And amongst some of that intensity, or in the middle of all of that intensity, were there some moments of humor or some unexpected things that still make you smile in sort of a very emotional, turbulent time as well?
Yeah, I guess, do you know, the probably the, although maybe not humorous, but the really nice things that have came out of that journey and doing the 128 marathons is that there's a lot of people within my local community in Tynemouth North Shields or within my running club or within my workplace that have reached out and said, you know, I've also experienced suicide. And I've then, you know, it sounds a bit sad to make friends with someone who's also experienced a loss, but I've genuinely made friends throughout this challenge via people that have wanted to support or people that have been through similar experiences. And, you know, I've had people directly come up to me and say, even just last week, I delivered a talk at work and someone came up to me and said, you know, I've worked in this company for 25 years and I've never ever told anyone about the fact that I lost my stepson to suicide. And he came up and told me that. So those little moments of like, you know, the domino effect where I've decided to share my story and then that allows someone to feel comfortable enough to do the same with theirs. That certainly, you know, that makes me really quite warm inside and makes me smile.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
and
fantastic.
there's a number of sort of stories where that's happened and it's pretty powerful really. And it's hard to comprehend as someone who's perhaps inspired them to talk about their experience.
Well, it always starts, as I think Simon Sinek always talks about, it starts with why. You
Yeah.
weren't just doing it just for actually, you know what, I fancy challenging myself. There was a real why behind it, a
Yeah,
real
yeah,
driver, a real purpose. And then coming back to the point of, like you were saying, well, actually, I've said it in my mind. But if you've then reached out to two or three other people that have done bigger numbers and they were like, okay, here's roughly what you're to expect. It might not be exactly that. It gives you sort of a rough path of where you're going for.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when I was planning it, like I said, I reached out to someone who'd done 365 and 365 days, and he was actually during his challenge. He was on about day 320 when I was speaking to him. Um, so I was thinking to myself, well, he's done that many. Surely I can do a third of that. So I
Yeah.
kind of talked myself into it that way. And then the woman that I'd spoke to in America, she has a prosthetic leg and she'd done 100 and 100. So then again, I was like, well, wow, I'm inspired by that. If she can do 100 and 100, so can I. So yeah, I probably spoke to the two worst people that made me think I could do it, but here we are.
Well, it's the same with I can't think what the chap who ran the 4 minute mile. He once he broke it, I think the
Yeah,
next year so many other people broke it, but before he broke it, nobody could ever break it. So I think once you have somebody that something you can see or associate with has gone through that, you're like, well, I'll just follow because they've broken
yeah,
that psychological barrier down, haven't they?
exactly. Yeah. So no, it was really useful to have those people to bounce ideas off and look for sort of advice as well during what I was doing.
Yeah. And did you do some fundraising alongside it? Was that your aim, or did you actually think along the journey, actually, I think now it's getting some traction. It would be great to have some fundraising because of some of those stories that people were reaching out to you with?
Yeah, so I did from the outset decided to fundraise with the goal of raising £10,000. So I chose two charities. One was If You Care Share, which is quite a small charity based in the Northeast that work. They do a lot of work with suicide prevention, but also the majority of their work comes with sort of suicide bereavement support to families who've been bereaved by suicide. And yeah, like I say, they're relatively small in comparison to some of the big mental health charities. So I was really keen on the money that I raised being redistributed within the Northeast. You know, the Northeast is the number one. It's got the highest rates of male suicide in the United Kingdom. So I was really keen on that. And then also given the sort of circumstances around the way we lost Connor, I wanted to say a bit of thank you to the RNLI. So I raised some money for them as well. But yeah, initial goal of £10,000. And in the end, including gift aid, we've raised over £100,000, which is pretty mental.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
incredible. Which then I suppose keeps you going when you think, actually, I've got to complete this now because people are believing, and it gives you
Yeah.
another, I suppose,
Yeah, definitely. Of
physical booster, even though it might not make the blisters any easier or the DOMS any
course.
easier or the dehydration any easier.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
wow.
I was receiving messages every day, and I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be like another £1,000 worth of donations. And it does make you just think, well, there's no way I can stop. And I remember within the first, I think maybe even the first 10 days, we'd got to 10 grand. And I remember saying to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my fiance, I remember saying like, "Ah, I wonder what we're gonna get to. Do you reckon we'll get to 20?" And she would be like, "Oh, well, maybe 20." And then within like 30 days we're at 20. And then I started saying, "Oh, well, maybe we'll get to 50." And I remember her saying, "No way, there's no way we'll get to 50." And yeah, it just continually went up, and genuine shock and surprise every time it sort of reached another milestone. And I remember when I was setting the sort of fundraising targets, I thought that was ambitious. I really did. So for it to go as high as it did was absolutely amazing. And yeah, raised a huge amount of money for really great charities.
Yeah, and again, if we come back and touch on to the community aspect, because obviously the first charity you mentioned obviously is a local community charity. Obviously, the support you had from people, the messages, did people turn up on the side of the road once they got to know that you were running a certain route, or
Yeah,
conversations you were having in the lunch queue at work or at the local shops or anything? Did people start to think, oh, there's that guy again running with a head torch in the morning?
yeah, it did get a bit bonkers, to be honest, after a couple of weeks. Once people started to realize what I was doing, I did tend to stick to the main routes and sort of quite locally. I had this thing in my head: if I run too far away from home, I feel like I'm too far away. So I'd often just do little loops within where I am. But yeah, getting tooted in the morning, or people just running along the seafront and they'd be like, "Oh, can I join in with you for a few miles?" And I met loads of people like that.
Well,
And people would, yeah, there was a sort of a group of lads who I'd never met before the challenge, but used to come out on a Saturday morning, 6 a.m., and do a half marathon or 30K with me. So there was always people wanting to support, and the community aspect was really great. One day I'd finished a full marathon on a Sunday, and I'd met my dad at a local pub, country pub, and we'd sat down for our Sunday dinner, and the guys who own the pub had came over and said, "Oh, we've heard about what you're doing, and we got our Sunday dinner for free," and just little things like that that was really sort of supportive and did keep me going. Yeah, the sort of community around where I live and local area was massive in helping, and yeah, I think it created a real good amount of conversation around what I was doing and why I was doing it. Yeah, it was really great.
so it's a little, I mean, have you ever seen the film Forrest Gump? Was it a bit like that where he runs and
Yeah, it was a little
sort
bit like that.
of unshaven whilst you were running and other people were trying to go, or was it a bit more like Rocky or something? You had your headphones in and people were coming out with
No, it
stuff
was a
like
little
that.
bit more Forrest Gump. My mum likes to call me Forrest Gump.
Does she?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that, where people would be joining from the streets.
Nice. But it's lovely though, and I think then by you doing something, putting yourself out there, the conversations become easier. And did you sort of find that, okay, yes, you were doing the social media vlogs and things like that. Did you actually find people coming out, not necessarily the stigma around it, but it became easier to talk about it? The thoughts that you were putting away where you put running off for 6 months, did it become sort of easier and
Y-
flowing to have
Yeah, I mean,
a conversation? Not the ins and outs of how, but what we can do to support in the grieving process.
yeah, definitely. I mean, even just selfishly, if I think about myself and my mum and my dad, we were able to talk about even just how we're feeling, or we had conversations about Connor and over the dinner table, and we had really open communication that we probably never ever had prior to doing that challenge. So yes, there was lots of people that I also had conversations with, and even friends that maybe felt a little bit more comfortable to talk to me about my experience. But probably the most important and most powerful sort of change for me was being able to just do that with my mum and my dad in a little bit more of an open forum.
Mm.
Um, and it just allows us to sort of deal with some of those emotions a bit more healthily, and Yeah, so I had a fantastic amount of conversations and certainly made it a lot easier to talk about that.
Which is all part of the grieving process, is being able to talk about it, being able to share it and relive some of the moments that you had as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, never anticipated it to ever end up being like this, doing these marathons. I was just thought, right, let's just get the running done. We'll raise some money for charity and I'll do it in the memory of my brother. But yeah, it quickly developed into a bit quite cathartic for all of us, and being able to just, talk a little bit more openly, and people then felt a little bit more comfortable to talk to us. And I always say as well, losing someone to suicide, it's really challenging because there is those sort of questions why you tend to ask yourself, is there anything else I could have done? And alongside that comes an element of shame, especially for parents. I think it's really difficult. And I really do believe that doing these marathons and the sense of community that are developed around where we live changed that shame into pride. People there was never any shame cast upon us, but you have that sense of, you have that feeling, and yeah, I think that quickly developed into pride, and something that we were doing was really great, all in memory of Connor, and everyone knew about Connor for the fantastic person he was, and it was really quite special.
And it reduces, I suppose, like, it's not necessarily the shame, but the stigma that sometimes
Yeah,
goes around it. Because sometimes, even if you just had, if there is such a thing as a regular death or a natural cause of death, people still don't quite know fully how to approach that with the other person. And perhaps the other person that's grieving doesn't quite know how to either internalize or externalize those conversations at all. So it's nice that you say you've been able to create an open forum. It's allowed people at work to come, and you think that person who's had 25 pent up emotion to be able to go, God, look at that. Yeah, you can share that thing. And humans are connected by experiences, by emotions, and by the things that we've shaped us.
yeah, massively, completely agree. Yeah,
And if we jump back into the running a little bit then, so for somebody that's never run a marathon that might be listening to this,
yeah,
what's some of the fueling, or what would a typical day look like? What would the sleep look like? We go into some of that, and then we can
yeah.
multiply it over 100.
Yeah, so I guess when I was planning it, I was sort of figuring out fueling, calorie intake, and um, I'm quite a slim person, so I'm 6'5" and about 84, 85 kg. So I was working out that I'd probably need around 4,500, 5,000 calories a day to maintain weight. And I was quite keen on trying not to lose a huge amount of weight, mainly because I didn't have a lot to
Yeah.
lose. But within the first week, that just became impossible, really. Trying to fuel around work and trying to fuel around the running as well was just really, really challenging. So I quickly scrapped the idea of trying to get 4,500 calories a day and kind of just started going with eating as much as I could to the point where I felt full. And if I felt like I was energized enough to go for the run, then I figured I was doing a good job. And you can always take gels and carbohydrate drinks and protein shakes. So I was taking lots of supplements and things like that to try and boost the calorie intake and also keep myself functioning healthy. So there was that element of it. And I guess a standard day would be around 4:45, wake up, try and have a large sort of carby breakfast before I head out for about 5:30, 5:45, and then I'd run for about 2 hours. 2 hours, 10 minutes would be usual time for the half marathon in the morning before work. That would get me back for about 8, and then I'd start work at 8:30. So majority mainly work from home, which obviously helps minus the commute. And so that gave me a bit of time back on my day. So then I'd have a working day, try and just, be consuming calories where I can, lunchtime. And then as soon as I finished work at about 4:30, I'd just try and get straight back out the door, which was often the hardest part, was getting back out in the afternoon for another half marathon. And then that would take me to about 7 o'clock. By the time I got ready, got out, so then I'd be back for 7. I'd have a hot bath usually for recovery, have my tea, bit of stretching, and then I'd be back in bed for 9 o'clock.
And that
So
was
that was just
128 days.
day after day. That was Monday to Friday. On the weekends, I actually much preferred doing the full thing. So I'd often wake up as early as I could without sacrificing sleep and just try and get it out the way. So I'd maybe start about 6 a.m., do a marathon, and that meant if I started at 6, I'd be finished before 12. So usually it was between 4 to 4.5 hours. I think the slowest marathon was about 4 hours 45, and the fastest one was 3 hours 17. So that was about the range, but average 4 hours.
Wow. Because it's not like you're trying to get the best time.
No, no,
Like
not
where
at
you
all.
were trying to do the 5K, can I get sub 16? Then
Yeah, no.
I've just got to keep going. And like you say, some days, if you haven't fueled, if you think you picked up a little bit of a bug, or go on to some of the injuries in a minute, you're holding it, nursing an injury. It's about completing, which has a
Yeah.
different mindset. And how did you find changing that mindset from being quite competitive at the athletics club to actually, I've just got to get round and I've just got to keep going? Was that quite a difficult shift to do?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it was quite a nice shift, really, because I wasn't really focused on pace. I wasn't really bothered, but I did always have the sort of toss up in my head between, I could run super duper slow. I mean, for me, slow pace for me, try and do the marathon in sort of 5 hours, 5.5 hours. But then there's the balance between, do I really want to be outdoors running for 5.5 hours where I could be out there for sort of 4 to 4.5? So I was trying to strike the balance between speed and also getting it over and done with. Um, so yeah, I was never really too bothered on pace. And if I was really struggling with an injury or a niggle, or hadn't really fueled properly, I would just go slower. I didn't have any shame in sort of maybe walking for half a mile if I had to, or just slowing it down as a jog, complete the 26 point in the 24 hours. And that was my aim for every day.
And like you say, then if you're splitting it, half marathon in the morning, you then probably stiffen up because you probably sat down, unless you had the
Yeah.
luck of a stand-up desk as well.
Yeah.
Then getting back out and going. Did you find that you picked up more niggles, or were more noticeable of niggles in the latter part, or on some of the slower, longer runs than the fast, shorter, sharper run? Well, not the short, sharp run of a marathon, but you know what I mean? Some of the faster times.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was hard to say really. I never had 2 days the same, to be honest. And the niggles, I probably couldn't pinpoint where they actually came from. It was just a case of always managing a little bit of tightness, a little bit of stiffness. And I probably did become a bit numb to some of the aches and pains. I probably could argue that my feet, ankles and knees were probably sore throughout. But often, yeah, just pain thresholds were probably changing, and as things got sorer, didn't really recognize the rest of the aches and pains in the body. One thing that I did use quite a lot, if I ever did get a bit of a flare up, knees were always a bit of an issue, to be honest. I just run on grass. So I've done quite a few marathons around a field, just to try and soften the impact, or look for trails as well, because smashing the concrete every day, it's not good for you really. And yeah, trying to keep that up. And another thing that I was really concerned with is, for runners, a lot of runners do strength and conditioning,
Mm.
try and keep all the sort of muscles nice and strong that support the movements to run. And I wasn't really doing any of that. Considered doing it, but just trying to fit it around all the marathons and the energy expenditure. So I didn't do any sort of strength and conditioning or anything like that. And I think that did impact where I was picking up niggles and feeling sore. So yeah, I just describe it as a logistical nightmare, trying to fit everything in and manage
And
everything.
it's then finding the smoothest path that allows you to achieve the outcome, which was, I've got to get 26.2 in a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
And then I got to be able to do it again and again and again. And what would you mentioned you had sciatica early on. Did that take a long time to clear up? Was that your sort of most prevalent injury as such, other than the blisters and perhaps losing toenails and things like that?
Probably. That was the one thing that really did reduce me to a very slow jog, to the point where I was maybe walking for a minute, jogging for a minute, just trying to get through. But yeah, that did ease off eventually. I had, main one was knees that used to just be sore, and a little bit of sort of hamstring issues. But I guess, going back to the sort of community element, I was supported by two physios locally. So I get one physio did me once a week. Every Friday was like a reset, and that was really useful. And then there was another physio that gave me once a month, and she actually had sort of the capability to do acupuncture and things like that. So I had quite a good mix of treatments that did help me get through some of those tougher times as well. But yeah, looking back, main injuries was sciatica. Maybe not an injury, but swollen feet. I really struggled. My feet were just constantly swollen, trying to find shoes that fit. And then yeah, the knees sort of around the patella area, right across the front, just from overuse. Really, that's all it is. Yeah,
Yeah, from doing that. And I suppose it was interesting you just said that no 2 days were the same. And actually, it
yeah,
might be quite nice if somebody's listening to this that might want to, I don't know, do 2 or 3 marathons within a year, and they're trying to say they do one in the spring, one in the summer, and one in the autumn. They're going to have three completely different races. And
yeah,
that's okay to have those three different races for those reasons, because you've had 28 marathons in 28 days and you've actually had no one marathon was ever the same. You've just had a closer time to gather data rather than
yeah,
three marathons over a 12-month
yeah,
period.
definitely. I mean, another little mantra that I used that used to help me was if I was particularly struggling, there was days where, I'd start a run, I'd be a mile in, I've got 25 miles to go, and I just have genuinely in that moment have no idea how I'm going to get through 25 miles. And I used to just tell myself, you don't get 3 bad days. And that at the beginning, it just started out as, get to Friday. You're finding it tough today. Let's just get to Friday and see how we are. And then every time I did that, I'd get to Friday and I was genuinely, well, maybe not. I was genuinely better, but I was still struggling. But, I genuinely didn't have 3 bad days in a row. And every time I did struggle, I used to just tell myself, get through the next 3 days and see how you feel. And every time I did that, I turned a corner and managed to sort of recover. So I use that now. If I'm having a shitty day or I'm struggling, just get through the next couple of days, and I think it does work.
Yeah. And have you applied that to sort of the grieving process as well, not just the
Yeah,
physical
yeah,
thing as
definitely.
well?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I used that during the marathons, not just for the physical challenges, but the emotional challenges as well. And yeah, use that to this day and will probably carry that for the rest of my life. That little tool that, just bad times do pass, get through the next couple of days and reassess, and often it's improved.
Yeah. Almost chunking it down, isn't it?
Yeah.
You started then in January. What was it like going out in the dark, wet, and cold to then having the mornings? I mean, we've had a wonderful summer this year, but going out in the mornings with the sunrise coming up, the birds chirping, did that sometimes make those aches and pains a little bit more pleasant, or
Yeah.
with the sunsets or things like that?
Yeah. I must say, like, I was actually quite lucky in terms of weather. I think I only got rained on about maybe 15 to 20 times throughout the whole 128 days. So I did do quite well with the weather. Um, and like you say, yeah, once sort of March, February, late February, March came around, the times that I was running, I was just out before the sunrise, and then I was watching the sunrise pretty much I was watching it every day, and it was really quite special. And I was doing very similar routes, and some of them were up trails, and around where I live we've got something called wagon ways, and it's nice sort of cycle paths. And I could really see the seasons change, all the birds chirping, sun rising, and yeah, I had a lot of time just to be me, myself and I, bit of music down the trail. So yeah, it wasn't all total struggles and battles. It was some days quite enjoyable.
Good. And your mum wasn't cycling behind you on an e-bike with a box of chocolates?
I'd managed to get her on the bike a couple of times. I did have my fiance Jamie. She was out on the bike quite a lot as well. She was very supportive. Often
Good.
have them carrying the food and water.
Because again, that's something else you got to think. If you're not too far away, but you didn't have to keep coming home to
Yeah,
stop and go again. It was nice to have
exactly.
somebody out and do that. And I mean, I used to walk to work very early in the morning, and sort of between 5 and 5:30, and it was such a quiet time. And I was listening to, or I was lucky enough to meet a gentleman that raced with Sir Jackie Stewart and things like that. And he said everybody should experience the world 100 feet under the sea and about 100 and something feet in the air, but also first thing in the morning before sunrise and as the sun is setting, because you then get a bigger perspective on what the world is going through rather than just the hustle and bustle. And
Yeah,
when I was walking to work that early in the morning, it was amazing how dry it was. But then you got to work time and it was raining. So everyone
yeah,
was coming into the office going, oh, it's wet, it's soaking, it's always raining in the morning. I go, well, actually, I walked down in pretty much shorts and t-shirt or shorts and a jumper or just a jacket on, it was quite surreal. And like you say, 128 days, only have 3 or 4 days worth of rain is is not too bad.
Yeah, I done pretty well. And to be honest, the worst weather I had was when I was working away. So with the nature of my job, I sort of travel around the country quite a lot. And I remember one day in particular, it was down in Kent, and I thought, well, I'm going right down south. It should be nice.
Yeah.
So I didn't really. It was bad plan on my behalf, but I didn't really pack very warm clothes, and it was absolutely horrific. Hailstone, horizontal hailstones, freezing cold, and I didn't get the full half marathon done in the morning. I only managed 10 miles because I had to get to work, and then I had a train home from Kent at 5 p.m. back to Newcastle, and I didn't get home till about 9. So I had to go out and do 16 miles at 9 p.m. And I think I finished at about 10 to midnight. So that was definitely one of the worst days and the worst weather. So I was happy to be back up in the northeast with the sunrise.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. And what did it feel like when you achieved? Because you said 2nd of June you finished,
2nd of June, yeah.
and that was on your brother's birthday.
Yeah.
And how did that feel that you realised you'd got to run another marathon the next day?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty special final day, to be honest. I kind of just put out on my social media, was happy for anyone to join in with the last second half. So if you wanted to join for a half marathon, 10K, 5K, whatever you wanted to do, I was more than happy for you to join. And then where I live, we have a castle. I don't know if you know Tynemouth, the area, but it's got the Priory Castle. And English Heritage, who own that, said that they would be happy to sort of open up the grounds and open up the gates. So finished in the castle. So I had quite a monumentous finish, really. And I think there was easily about 500 people turned up to run. And then to actually just watch the finish was probably about 1,200 people. So it was just bonkers, really. And I remember doing the last 10K along the coast, that there was no space on the path, and all the runners just took up the road. And obviously people that didn't really know what was going on were all honking and getting a bit pissed off. But it was just hilarious because it was just all these runners taking over the coast. And yeah, and obviously I had built up to that final day for so long, and then finishing inside the castle with all my friends, family, people that I'd met along the way, and 90% people that I didn't know that had just felt a connection to the story and wanted to come down and show support. Was I always say it's probably the first birthday of Connor's that we've had since he passed that was actually quite a happy day, a nice reflection, good memories, and we didn't just sort of wallow in self-pity. It was really nice. And then also my fiance, was a massive support throughout the whole challenge, in helping me get through some of those tough days and helping me fuel. I proposed to her at the end of the final marathon. So it was a really, really, really special day to be able to finish the challenge, raise so much money, but also sort of cherry on the cake with the proposal as well.
And it was a good way that if she was going to say no, there was 1,200 people that could go, boo, how dare you? So I like the way you stack the odds in your favour. You didn't get her to carry the ring round, did you, in the support bag and think, oh, hang on, I got to get my snack out the bag, and then away you go.
No, that was in the pocket of the shorts. But I did think, yeah, if there's enough people watching, she can't say no. So
yeah.
That was the idea. But no, I mean, arguably the best day of my life really was that final day.
Yeah. And what did it feel like with the alarm clock going off or not going off the next day?
I mean,
go for a run.
It was a strange sensation, and I didn't really feel that compelled to go for a run. I was quite happy to have the day off. I did go for a run the day after that. And, a lot of people said to me, oh, are you worried about how you're going to feel when it's finished? Are you going to sort of, because people tell me that people were telling me that I was going to get the sort of post-race blues, or as you call it, I've gone from such a high to maybe not anymore, but I never really experienced anything like that. I finished the challenge. I was so happy with everything that I'd achieved, very, very content. And I was just happy to get back running like a normal person and just do what I enjoyed. So I never really sort of had that sensation of, what's next, or do I need to complete something else? I was just really happy with what I'd set out to do, and I'd done everything that I wanted to do. But I think it might have been the week of finishing, I did get the opportunity to go to New York to then do the New York Marathon. So I'd ran the equivalent distance, but I'd never been to New York, and I'll be genuinely honest, I never ever thought I would ever go. And if you'd asked me sort of at the beginning of the year, would you like to go to New York to do the marathon? I probably would have said no. But in doing the challenge and sort of coming a long way, I then got the opportunity to go and do the New York Marathon. And I always said that that was probably the biggest challenge out of all the other marathons, was just going there and doing that one, because it was really, really difficult to even just get on the plane and go where Connor wanted to be, and then to be walking around the streets of New York, and then to run the marathon there was really, really difficult. Far more difficult than the 128. So I then had to kind of turn myself around and try and prepare for New York Marathon. So that was really, really nice as well.
Yeah, and did obviously that's towards the end of the year, and I suppose that would be your first official organised
Yeah.
marathon. So it probably felt a bit odd scanning in,
Yeah.
getting your
Well,
kit bag and stuff.
during the 128, I did two official ones. So I did Manchester, and then there was one in Newcastle. So they were technically my first marathons. But yeah, this New York one was the first one that I'd really sort of gone to try and do a half decent time. Because that is what I enjoy. I enjoy the competitive nature of running. I enjoy pushing myself. So I did want to go out there and give it my all. But yeah, I quickly realized how much the 128 marathons had taken out my body, and I'd done a bit of testing, and yeah, I was really struggling to turn myself around to try and run quick again. Really, it was a massive challenge.
And are we talking a lot quicker in terms of you wanted to have a goal, or did you want to just see how fast you could run and actually
Yeah,
treat it as a longer 5K?
yeah, I wanted to get sub 245, so that was my goal. But I'd gone and done some testing, so I'd had my VO2 max tested and my lactate threshold test. So I had some physiological sort of parameters, and they actually came out and said that I had chronic fatigue, sort of physiologically in some of those energy systems were just not working properly, and the test results had said that I probably wouldn't be able to get faster than 255 on a good day. So I was really struggling to try and pull myself round. I'd actually got a coach who I'd been coached by before, and he'd helped me get in sort of good shape. And yeah, went out to New York at the beginning of November and had the race of my life. Was just absolutely incredible atmosphere, incredible scenes. Obviously very emotional, but I think that just evoked a bit of, come on, Lewis, let's do this. And yeah, I managed to get 244. So got the goal that I wanted and finished the sort of final marathon and closed that chapter on the challenge in New York in Central Park.
Wow. And what
Yeah.
sort of lead time did you have from finishing to going? Is it about 3 months, 4 months?
4 months. Yeah. Yeah. 4 months. So probably a decent amount of time to train for a marathon, but
But not
I
off
was
the back of 6 months worth of
not
marathon.
off the back. Yeah. I was knackered, and probably a little bit arrogantly thought I could turn myself around quicker. And even to now, I still struggle with recovery. I don't recover as well as I used to. Um, yeah, still just trying to manage the effects of doing such a large endurance event. And I don't think there's many studies that really show you what it takes out of your body. And, it's not just your muscles and it's not just your sort of joints. It's this central nervous system. It's your heart rate. And yeah, there's a lot to manage. So I'm definitely having a bit more of downtime now.
Yeah, good. And at least you don't have to get up at 4:45. And that'll make a big difference getting your circadian rhythm back.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know I listened to an exercise physiologist, and he was talking about he's done the Sabda Marathon, the Spartan Marathon, which I think is 150 miles in Athens, running in the heat. And if he goes and does that like an event like that, he'll have a minimum of 3 months off, like doing nothing when he gets back.
Yeah.
You do it, or even like the Arctic Circle, he's done that. And he said, yeah, well, actually, it's just then getting your food pattern right, getting your blood levels right, getting your energy right, let alone with yourself. If you take your example, you've processed grief through that, which is an emotional stress, because then you've got the physical, mental, and emotional. You've got the perfect triad for everything to go through there. And you listen to sports people like tennis players or golfers, they go, yeah, we've won the championship, but I feel emotionally drained. And I think until you're in that place, being emotionally drained, people don't really know what that is and how long it can take to recover in a positive way to recover
Yeah.
in it. And then the last thing to go in your body is locomotion, so movement. Other systems will shut down to allow you to move, which is back from saber-toothed tiger times. If
Hmm.
we saw one of them and we were tired and we hadn't eaten for 10 days, we could still run away and live another day.
Yeah.
There we go. But on a lighter note, what was some of the most ridiculous or unexpected things that you had to either improvise with or eat or challenge along the way?
So I guess eating wise, I probably ate my girlfriend's nana's apple crumble and custard every single day. That was like a staple that I'd introduced into my diet, which was probably quite ridiculous, but it was really calorific, and I was eating apple crumble and custard every day.
Nice.
Um, and then
Still,
probably not so much now, but I do dabble with a bit of it now still. Not quite every day. It's more of a once a week treat. And I guess, yeah, the most ridiculous one was running 16 miles at midnight after a train journey. And looking back, to be honest, it was probably quite risky because if the train was delayed, I would have technically failed the challenge and not done what I set out to do. So I'm not sure how I would have managed that one if it was delayed. But luckily, I got home in time and managed to do the final 16 miles. But yeah, that did feel a bit mental. And at the time, I managed to do it, and I was actually all right. I got home at midnight, went to bed for about midnight. But then I had work the next morning, so I was back up at 4:45, back out for another half marathon within about 6 hours of completing the previous. So that's when it just started to get a bit bonkers, and trying to play catch up off of that was knocked me out of my routine a little bit.
and if we zoom out a little bit now from obviously completing the challenge and finishing in New York and things like that, you said before this challenge you didn't really talk about losing your brother, but how has sort of publicly speaking mile after mile helped that process? How has that helped you?
Yeah, I mean, it's massively helped me. If I think back to before the challenge, I definitely couldn't have done podcasts like these, or I've done, a little bit of public speaking as well to local schools and businesses. And I think even just looking at myself from afar doing things like this just shows how far I've came. And yes, like I say, I still get people that come up to me and say, in you sharing your story, you've really inspired me to do the same. And it's hard to comprehend the impact that that can have on someone. So yeah, I'm going to try and just keep doing what I'm doing. If I can keep sharing my story, then that's fantastic. And it's good for me as well to keep the memory of Connor alive. I think when you do lose someone, you don't want to just not talk about them and try and forget them. People like to talk about them. I want people to ask me questions about my brother and ask me what type of person he was, because it means I can talk about Connor and keep his memory alive. I don't want to sort of package it away and try not to talk about it because it's too painful. I don't want to go on my life like that. So if I can continue talking about Connor in a positive way, then it's really fantastic.
The journey has taught you a lot about resilience then and a lot of grief. And what does it sort of mean to be able to carry his memory forward, do you think?
Yeah, it's amazing to be able to sort of carry that memory. And there's a huge number of people now that know the story of Connor, and not just because he took his own life, but actually who he was as a person and what he enjoyed and where he wanted to live and the degree he did and the job he did. And, just being able to share that and people now know his name and know who he was. It's pretty special. Yeah, I really do. I'm really grateful for the opportunity that I had to be able to do this challenge and complete it as well. So it's been amazing.
And if you could sit down with you now, knowing what you've gone through now, going back to 2018, and you could sit with that person who had just lost his brother, what do you think you would say to him, knowing what you've learned now on your own challenge that you've completed?
Yeah, I mean, I do think about this a lot, and when I look back to myself being 18 years old and going through something like that, I genuinely feel sorry for me. It'd be in that situation. Looking back, I don't think I realized how difficult it was to navigate that at that age. Um, and I guess I'd just like to say that it does get better, and talking does help. I never really saw any professional help, and haven't. I had some counselling through school, but never really took anything on further after that. And I think not to say that that's what I should have done, but I just think talking definitely helps. And you know, like I say, live by the motto of there's no three bad days in a row. And I don't really like the phrase that time is a healer, but you do manage to find a way to manage those emotions. It still hurts just as much. It's still just as difficult, but certainly find a way to manage those emotions. And the biggest one for me over the past 6 years is just speaking to people that have been through similar experiences. You know, you're not the only person that's been through that, and there is people that you can relate to and have been through the same thing.
Which is massive. And if we could put a camera on the wall, and you were saying you would sit down with your mum and dad and yourself, if Connor could come back for 24 hours to see what you've gone through and what you've done as a family, what do you think he would sit around saying around the dinner table?
Yeah, I think he'd be pretty proud of what I've achieved and what we've achieved as a family over the last 10 months now. And yeah, I think that the thing with suicide, it's such a temporary fix to something. Sorry, it's a permanent fix to something that's very temporary, and you know, it would just be it's difficult to it's difficult to understand what that person's going through in that moment of time in time. Yeah, it's a, like I say, temporary fix to a permanent problem, and if only things could be different.
And now this chapter is complete with your marathons and going just back to a bit of fun running. What do you hope will grow from it, either for you or the people that have followed your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed the fundraising element. I've really enjoyed sharing my story and it sounds strange to say, but inspiring other people to do the same, whether that be running a marathon or a half marathon or opening up about their experience with suicide. That's been really motivating for me and really something special. So yeah, I'm not sure going forward what that will look like. I've enjoyed doing the public speaking and continuing to share my message. So I'm kind of the opinion that any opportunities come my way, I'll just say yes. Fundraising wise, never say never, but I don't think I would ever do anything that was as long and as large as that. I think I would struggle to find something that was long and as large as that. Even running across America is not as many miles as that is. But yeah, I never say never. I would maybe do another endurance challenge in the future, but maybe something slightly different. And yeah, I think before I do any more fundraising or anything like that, I think I need to revisit the 16-minute 5K and see if I can crack that once and for all.
But make sure you fully recovered from these runs before you
Yeah,
go and do that. That'll be otherwise
yeah,
you'll be ringing the physios up again
I
and go,
know.
can you see me again? And for anybody listening who might be struggling silently or struggling in their own way, what message would you hope they take from your story and what you've put out there?
Yeah, I think having the courage to share how you feel will have a humongous effect, not just on you, but others. You know, you'd probably be surprised if you meet a friend and you say, oh, you know, I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. They potentially might be feeling the exact same thing, and you've just now given them the open forum to tell you how they feel as well. And I've really found that in me sharing my experience, my feelings, that people have just done the same, and it really does have that domino effect. But one thing I've learned through the marathons is that you genuinely don't get 3 bad days in a row, and if you can live by that mantra, it'll get you through some real tough times. Um, so that's probably what I'd share. And as well as that, if anyone is ever in a genuine dark moment, that there are professionals out there, and to seek those out.
And it's even changing like your physiology. Like you said, you couldn't speak about it for so long. Then being able to run, the enjoyment, the something that you had, actually that creates some physiological change in the body to then be able to express it.
Yeah.
So it's actually it's beyond inspiring to be able to say, right, I've had this, pull your socks up, pull your laces up, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go large, and then follow it through is an incredible feat. From It's just wonderful. And from carrying so much at the beginning to running 28 marathons to finding your voice again, each mile probably became easier. It's been so inspiring to hear your journey, Lewis. And thank you for joining us on 360 Life Stories.
Thank you.
And if somebody is interested in following you, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so probably the best place is Instagram, and you can follow me at NCL_TO_MYC. So that's @NCL_TO_NYC.
Brilliant. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.